Germany, we often think of it as this economic powerhouse, an industrial titan, right? Especially when it comes to cars, that whole made in Germany thing. For decades, it stood for quality, engineering, just sheer prowess. But what if that image, that whole foundation, is starting to, well, crack under some serious pressure? Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really interesting sources, and it paints a challenging picture, frankly, for the German economy. We're going to focus quite a bit on the car industry, its cornerstone, really, and explore how this series of almost seismic events kicking off with the war in Ukraine has pushed giants like Volkswagen towards moves that are, well, pretty shocking. Our mission here is to unpack what this all means, not just for VW, but for Germany's competitiveness going forward. It's a story with some unexpected twists.
It really is.
Yeah.
What's fascinating looking at these sources is how you have all these different things coming together. Geopolitics, energy policy decisions, shifts in the global market. They've basically converged to create this perfect storm, and it's genuinely shaking the foundations of an economy many thought was, well, pretty much unshakable. It forces you to look past the headlines,
Yeah.
understand the deeper currents, especially as Germany is kind of redefining its industrial future.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our sources take us back to a really specific date, February 28th, 2022, just days after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. EU energy ministers are having this emergency meeting in Brussels. You can almost imagine the tension, right? They're facing this huge question. What was top of mind for them?
Well, it immediately brought up this almost existential question. What happens when your entire continent, Europe, relies on one single source, Russia, for about 40% of its natural gas? So European officials were asking the hard questions. Can we actually keep the lights on? Can we heat homes this winter? Can our factories keep running? I mean, their whole economic and social stability was suddenly on the line because of this deep dependence.
Right. And that first winter, 2022, it almost felt like, wow, Europe acted fast. They did manage incredibly to cut back on Russian gas and avoid, total disaster. But that quick shift, as our sources show, it definitely came at a cost, a pretty painful one, it seems.
Oh, absolutely. This scramble for other gas supplies, it just sent shockwaves through the global energy markets. Prices didn't just rise, they soared to record, completely unprecedented levels. It wasn't just a small thing. It was like a tidal wave hitting consumers in their wallets, and critically, hitting the industrial sector, the engine for so many European economies.
And Germany felt this especially hard, right? Our sources really highlight that Germany was like the most dependent on Russian energy out of everyone.
By far, yeah. Their whole industrial strength, which was kind of built on this foundation of relatively cheap, easy-to-get energy, suddenly became their biggest weakness in this new reality.
Hmm. But just as Germany was trying to figure out where to get energy from, something else happened, something way more dramatic and frankly murky. It fundamentally changed Germany's energy picture, maybe forever. The sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. This wasn't just a market shock. It felt like an act of, well, economic violence almost. What did the sources say about this?
Well, the first signs of trouble for Nord Stream 1 started around August 31st, 2022. Gazprom, the Russian state company, said they were shutting it down for 3 days for maintenance. Standard stuff, maybe. But then September 2nd, they just said, nope, not restarting indefinitely, citing a technical problem. Of course, European leaders were immediately skeptical.
Right. It smelled like Russia using energy as a weapon.
Exactly. That was the feeling. But then things escalated. Later that month, end of September, parts of both Nord Stream 1 and 2 were physically blown up under the Baltic Sea. Initially, everyone pointed fingers at Russia. Made sense, right? Escalating the energy weapon tactic. But then this counterargument popped up pretty quickly. Why would Russia destroy its own pipelines? Pipelines that were worth a fortune and gave them huge leverage, especially when they could just turn the gas off whenever they wanted, which they'd already done.
Okay, so that's where it gets really complicated. Our sources then dig into a much more complex story about who might have actually done it, moving past those initial theories. What did the intelligence reports suggest?
Yeah, this is where it gets wild. According to intelligence reports cited by the Wall Street Journal, apparently way back in May 2022, there was a plan discussed, proposed at a meeting involving Ukrainian businessmen and military officials, believe it or not, to sabotage Nord Stream. And the reports say President Zelensky actually approved this plan initially.
Wow, Zelensky approved it.
That's what the reports suggest. And it gets crazier. Dutch military intelligence apparently found out about this plan in June. They told the CIA. The CIA then told Germany.
So the U.S. and Germany knew this might happen ahead of time. What did they do? That changes everything.
It really does. The reports say the CIA contacted Zelensky directly, basically urging him, you got to cancel this plan. Huge implications. Zelensky then apparently told his army commander, Valery Zaluzhny, to stop the operation. But the intelligence suggests Zaluzhny basically ignored that order, and the operation went ahead. Boom.
Okay, so if that's accurate, Ukraine, the country Germany is pouring aid into, might have been behind crippling Germany's main gas supply. I mean, the political fallout must have been immense. It sounds less like a tightrope and more like juggling chainsaws.
Immense is putting it mildly. The sabotage permanently cut Germany off from Russian gas, and they just weren't ready for that sudden, total break. For the German government, it became this huge source of embarrassment. The reports suggest they actually kept quiet about who they suspected for quite a while. Why? Fear of a massive public backlash against Ukraine, the country they were supporting. It just highlights this incredibly difficult position Germany was in, balancing support for Kyiv with their own energy security and what the public might think.
Okay, so Russian gas is gone. Forever, it seems. Prices are through the roof. What did the German government actually do to try and help people and businesses deal with this energy crisis?
Well, in late 2022, the German parliament did step in. They approved a pretty big plan, $100 billion, to cap gas and electricity prices for consumers and businesses, and it was a major effort to cushion the blow. But even with those caps, a lot of people and companies felt like, look, prices are still way higher than they used to be. It wasn't really enough to completely offset the pain.
Right, it softened the blow but didn't eliminate it. And those caps weren't forever, were they? That 100 billion wasn't sustainable indefinitely.
No, exactly. Fast forward to November 2023, the German finance minister, Christian Lindner, he announces the price caps. They're ending. Done by the end of 2023, not getting extended. And his reasoning was pretty blunt. We need to control public finances. He basically said the budget just couldn't handle it anymore. The strain was too much.
And wasn't there also a plan, our sources mentioned this, specifically for energy subsidies just for industry? That got shut down too, right? Which seems to show just how tight the money was.
Precisely. Back in May 2023, the economics ministry floated this idea. Let's give industrial factories subsidized electricity, like 6 cents per kilowatt hour, guaranteed until 2030. That would have been a huge help for energy-hungry businesses, costing maybe $30 billion. But the finance ministry shot it down almost immediately.
Just like that.
Pretty much. Said there was no money in the budget for that kind of long-term support. Flat out rejected.
So what's the takeaway here for German industry, especially those big energy users like the car manufacturers we mentioned?
Well, the bottom line is, with the government pulling back this support, German companies, German factories, they're basically left holding the bag. They have to bear the brunt of these high energy prices pretty much alone. And for industries like automotive, where energy is a massive part of your costs, this just keeps eating away at your profits, making it harder and harder to compete globally.
Okay, let's zero in on that now. The heart of German industry, cars. Our sources really focus on Volkswagen, a national icon, right? Synonymous with Germany, Inc. But the news coming out of VW, according to these sources, is just, well, it's shocking. It signals real trouble.
It's truly astonishing, yeah. The announcement came in early September 2024. Volkswagen, Germany's biggest car maker. For the first time in its nearly 87-year history, VW is seriously thinking about closing 2 of its 6 German factories.
Closing factories in Germany. For VW, that sounds incredibly serious. Why? What's driving this?
Well, VW's CFO, Arno Antlitz, laid it out pretty clearly. He said their German plants are making about 500,000 more cars than they can actually sell.
500,000?
Yeah, just massive overcapacity. Essentially, they have 2 factories too many, churning out cars nobody's buying. So they're spending way more keeping these places running than they're earning. And the CEO, Oliver Bloom, he didn't mince words either. He flat out said Germany is falling behind in competitiveness. That is a powerful statement from the head of VW.
So what is it specifically that's making German car production suddenly so uncompetitive? Our sources point to a couple of big things.
Yeah, 2 main factors are hitting them hard on costs. First, wages. There was an analysis by the German Auto Industry Association, German auto workers, averaging 62 euros an hour in 2023. Now, compare that. 23 euros in the Czech Republic, 29 euros in Spain. Or get this, 60 euros an hour in Hungary. And guess who's building a big factory in Hungary specifically to sell EVs into the EU? Tariff-free. China's BYD.
16 euros versus 62. That's a stark.
It's huge. And the second factor, which we keep coming back to, it's like a double whammy now. It is. The second, and maybe even bigger issue now, is energy prices. See, Germany always had high wages, but they offset that with cheap Russian energy. That was the deal, kind of, but that's gone. So now, German car makers have high wages and expensive energy. Meanwhile, Their competitors often have lower wages and cheaper energy.
So the whole equation is flipped.
Completely. It fundamentally undermines the old model. Premium engineering paid for by affordable energy. With both sides of that equation under pressure, their whole strategy is up in the air.
And it's not just about costs inside Germany, is it? Our sources also suggest VW is losing ground in key export markets, too, particularly one that used to be absolutely vital for them.
Yeah, if you zoom out, look at China. VW used to sell almost half its cars there. In 2019, it was like 40% of everything they made went to China. But Chinese car companies, especially BYD that's build your dreams, they've just exploded onto the scene.
Yeah.
Super rapid rise. They've eaten heavily into VW's market share in China, and now they're starting to compete directly with German brands right here in Europe. This pressure from new players is forcing VW's hand.
Okay, but what about the people? The workers. VW employs hundreds of thousands in Germany. It's almost like a national institution for jobs. What happens if factories close?
That's a huge question. VW has about 600,000 employees globally, roughly half of them, 300,000, right there in Germany. So the plan involves job cuts at those two factories they might close. But here's the twist. There's this old union agreement, like really old, from 1944. It basically prevents forced layoffs until 2029.
1944. Wow, so they can't just lay people off.
Not easily. Even if the factory's shut, the workers might legally have to stay on the payroll unless the union agrees to change the deal. And right now, the union is pretty much blaming management for the mess, so getting them to agree to layoffs seems, well, difficult. It's a very complex situation.
So is this VW story just, one company having a really tough time? Or are other German firms, especially in heavy industry, feeling similar pressures?
That's the key question, right? Is this bigger than VW? And the signs suggest, yes, it is. There was a survey by the German Chamber of Commerce and Industry, August 2024, found that 37% of German companies are actively thinking about cutting production in Germany or moving operations somewhere else entirely.
37%. That sounds high.
It is high, and it's up from 31% last year and way up from just 16% back in 2022. So you see this clear accelerating trend. If you look just at the energy-intensive companies, half of them are considering these moves, and two-thirds of all industrial companies surveyed. They feel their competitiveness is seriously threatened by high energy prices.
Any other big German names making similar moves, shifting stuff abroad, cutting back at home? Does it seem like a pattern?
Yeah, it does look like a broader pattern. BASF, for example, world's largest chemical company, a huge German name. They've also closed some facilities in Germany and have been expanding internationally quite significantly. So it points toward this trend people are starting to call deindustrialization. Or maybe it's more of a strategic shift away from Germany as the main production base for some of these big global players. It's happening across different sectors.
And the sources mention one more challenge. On top of energy costs, that's making things even harder, a serious shortage of skilled workers. How does that fit in?
Right, the skilled labor shortage just makes everything worse. It means companies are fighting over the available talent, which pushes wages up even higher. So you've got high energy costs and now intensifying pressure on wages because there just aren't enough skilled people to fill the jobs. It's gotten to the point where some German politicians are now seriously talking about needing more immigration and also making it easier for refugees already in the country to work, just to fill these critical gaps, especially because Germany's birth rate is low and the workforce is getting older.
So quite a picture. Germany's industrial heartland, once this engine fueled by cheap energy and global sales, now facing this, well, perfect storm. Soaring costs, geopolitical fallout, tough new competitors. The story of Volkswagen and really the wider German industrial scene, it's a stark reminder, isn't it? How quickly even the strongest economies can hit these huge, unprecedented challenges.
Absolutely. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, it just hammers home how deeply interconnected everything is. Energy policy, geopolitics, basic economic competitiveness. Germany's move away from Russian energy, politically necessary, driven by values, absolutely. But it has undeniably come at a steep economic price for its industrial core. It's a massive trade-off, and is forcing Germany to really rethink its entire industrial model for the 21st century. What does made in Germany mean now?
It really has been a thought-provoking deep dive. So much to consider. And maybe here's something for you, our listeners, to chew on. Given all these pressures we've talked about, the energy costs, losing market share, labor shortages, tight government budgets, do you think Germany might, down the road, actually reconsider its stance on Russian energy? Could they try to get that competitive edge back, even partially? And if they wanted to, how could that even work now, given the current politics and the way the world has changed? Just something to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.